This episode of the Golf Guru Show is sponsored by enveedhemp.com. That's ENVEED hemp.com. I'm happy to say that Enveed has been my choice for my CBD needs for almost 3 years now, and I can't begin to tell you how it's improved my life. They come in 3 formulas: Clarity, Relief, and Relax. I typically take a Clarity drop in the morning with my coffee to get me focused and ready to go for the day. Some Relief for my aches and pains or inflammation after a run or a workout. And then I do a drop of Relax before I go to bed that helps me get some of the best sleep that I've had in years. And my Whoop Band now tells me that it's definitely helping because my recovery scores have been higher than ever. Enveed Hemp CBD come in drops, roll-ons, and gummies, so you can take it however you choose. So go to enveedhemp.com and make sure you use the Guru code GURU20 for a 20% discount for life. You heard it right, 20% discount for life. CBD is a great supplement to keep you healthy and safe in these crazy times. So go get it. So let's get to today's episode.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
You know how to cut to the core of me, Baxter. You're so wise. But like a miniature Buddha covered in hair.
I want to become a guru so girls will like me. Then I will like myself.
Now, before we do this, let's go over the ground rules. Rule number 1. No touching of the hair or face.
Of course.
And that's it! Now let's do this!
What is up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Golf Guru Show. I am Jason Sutton, Director of Instruction at the beautiful Collinson River Club in Bluffton, South Carolina, and I am the Guru, where it is my mission to interview the top golf instruction minds in the business or high performers in all fields of study, break them down, get them to share all their stories, best practices, and information that have made them successful, and then share it with all of you so we can grow together as instructors and as people. Thanks again for all of you and your support of the podcast. And make sure you download this episode and hit that purple subscribe button so you don't miss any future shows that are coming your way. My guest on this episode is my good friend, Rick Sessinghaus. This is Rick's second appearance on the show, so welcome back. If you want to run it back, check out episode 117 for his first interview, which was incredible and was one of the most popular episodes of the show. But I think this interview is even better. As most of you know, Rick is a performance coach that specializes in the mental game and is most known for coaching PGA Tour player Collin Morikawa. In my opinion, I wouldn't classify Rick as a mental coach as much as he is just a complete golf coach that is getting great results from his players. I recently saw Rick speak at the Golf Magazine Top 100 Summit, where I think he gave the best presentation of the week, and we get into a variety of topics from that talk, as well as some great behind the scenes of his post-round conversations with Collin, even from the Hero World Challenge where he lost the 5-shot lead, which I think could be incredibly helpful for you coaches and junior golfers out there, which will give you some great insight into even the best and most mentally tough players tend to make mistakes down the stretch. So I was very grateful for his transparency and for sharing the thoughts and processes that he and one of the most mentally tough players like Collin deal with under pressure at the highest level. So I'll get out of the way and bring you my friend, the brilliant and talented Mr. Rick Sessinghaus. Thank you so much for coming back on the show, man. Welcome back. I know we've chatted a lot in the last year, I guess. It's almost been a year since you've been on the show, and then we've connected quite a few times over that length of time, and I saw you at the Top 100 Summit not long ago, and we connected there, and you gave a fantastic presentation, which I want to get into a lot of that information, but thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule.
Oh, no, I love it. I was looking forward to part 2 with you.
Absolutely. We promised the listeners part 2, and they're going to get it, and I'm really excited to catch up with you. I know we talked a little bit before we came on air about Collin, because we'll definitely discuss his. Lots happened since I talked to you. A lot of more wins and a lot more good stuff. But I think it would be helpful to share with the listeners maybe the debriefing that you had after the Hero, right? So I consider Collin the strongest mental player on the tour, right? Thanks to your guidance and what you guys have done together, which is fantastic. Even though as a young player, I still think he's so mentally strong, but it also shows you how difficult golf is and how things can kind of go off the rails, right? Did you guys have a conversation afterwards? Like I know you always probably do. Anything you could share that probably nobody on the Golf Channel maybe have heard so far would be kind of cool to talk about, I think.
Yeah, sure. I think for everybody listening, we do know golf is hard at times. And one of my philosophies is we're always learning, right? And so whether he wins the Open Championship, I would debrief and say, hey, what worked? What didn't? What do we need to continue to do? The questions stay the same. What did you do well? What did you learn? What do we have to work on? So the hero is no different. And I spoke with him multiple times throughout that week. And certainly the first 3 days, you would say things are good. So, hey, you're learning. Hey, I'm hitting a lot of good golf shots. And then day 4 certainly didn't go how he wanted it to go. And I think speaking with him after, without getting into too many details, I think it's just back to the same thing. Hey, did we have a game plan? Did we execute the game plan? Well, the game plan was set, and he felt that there was no use of changing a game plan, which he didn't. And the first 3 holes, he hit a lot of really good golf shots from a full swing perspective. So we knew that the driver was fine, the irons were fine, and there was nothing there that would indicate he was going to shoot a high score, right? Mm-hmm. Now, we're never into excuses, we're into reasons. And you can look at the shot that he hit with the 4-iron with the ball below his feet, but he also had a slight upslope. And I think it's just we have to do a better job of looking at what that lie was going to do. And I think he just he hit a bad golf shot and got exaggerated to a place you couldn't hit it. And he said, actually to me, he says, hey, after he hit his provisional, okay, and he hit it really, really well, he thought it's fine. So it didn't rattle him at the time, okay? Mm-hmm. And then, we move forward to 6, the par 5. There's mud on the ball in a second shot. Him and his caddy, you can hear talking about, hey, it's going left. How much, we don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty for that, for sure. Yeah. And as we as golfers know, we want to be committed and we want to know what the ball's going to do. And in this case, one of the best ball strikers in the world does not know where the ball's going to go. And again, part of it's mud, part of it maybe he obviously got the club face a little bit closed. And I think that one was more like, hey, there's some uncertainty. But as I spoke with him, I don't think it was a full swing issue. Certainly, he wasn't maybe not as sharp after that. But I think the concern, just from my part as a coach, was some of the early putts that went a little left to target, and we saw just more of a little pull going on that. So that's something that we're going to work on is that a mechanical thing? Is that a mental thing? He felt good going into warm-ups and stuff like that. So that's something that we will certainly look at. But, he's a competitor. He wasn't happy how everything finished, obviously. But it doesn't change that, what can we learn from that particular round? And I think we checked a lot of those boxes. And unfortunately, the putting wasn't where he wanted it to go. You get a couple shots. I mean, for him, I don't remember if he's ever lost 2 balls in one round of golf.
Probably
and you start
never.
combining
Since
that.
Junior golf.
Exactly. And then I think he would probably admit, then you start pressing a little bit when you had a lead and now you're chasing, and maybe that pressing and the back nine, you're just not quite as sharp. So a little bit of, as we know, kind of that momentum going in the wrong direction and trying to steer it in another way. And again, disappointed, but he's looking forward to having a little time off and then getting ready for Maui, the Tournament of Champions.
Yeah, I didn't know, obviously it's not a swing problem, right? I mean, I think, I look deeper into, like you do, more into the mental side. It's like, did we not have a clear picture? Was there a shot that maybe he wasn't comfortable with? And like you said, in the mud ball, obviously probably caused a bit of conflict. And then, I did notice the pulls and the putting, which I was going to ask you about. So I appreciate you sharing that. It just happens, right? I mean, it's not, exactly. So it's not something, it's not a dig on anybody. It's just, I think it's always curious to think, gosh, the best in the world sometimes have those moments. And I thought he really bounced back quite nicely. It's just, he just got out of control there for a couple holes, and what are you going to do? I mean, he was still fighting, but I'm always curious to hear the behind the curtain, what did you guys talk about? Was there anything that really kind of, jumped out to be like, oh wow, did he have a bad warm up? Was there, did he not sleep very good last night? It's usually stuff like that kind of gets you and people don't realize.
No, you're exactly right. And those are the questions we always do ask is you kind of have your little checklist, right? And that week was a very, very good week for him. Also personally getting engaged, he was in a very good state. So there was nothing on that final round that was mental per se. Warm up was fine. Like I said, the first 3 holes, a lot of quality drives, a lot of quality iron shots. And so, and it's just, again, there's some things that happen as we all have as golfers. And when it starts going a touch sideways is how can you bring it back? But, like every time we talk, I'm always proud of his insight, his honesty. He's never going to make excuses. And it's time we try to just never have that happen again. Right. And, and how quickly can you catch those things during a round is also one of our goals.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. 'Cause I know it's a little personal, which I understand. Let's dig back into Colin a little bit, because like I said, you had a really nice presentation that you gave at the Top 100 Summit, and I also appreciated the emotion, right? Like the gratefulness that you have of coming alongside something that's really, really special in golf. But you did have a nice little checklist of like what you found special in Colin. And I think that could help a lot of junior golfers out there. Cause I try to like share the gospel of what you've taught me over the last couple of years and things that you're talking about. Can you go through that list, if you can remember, like what you really feel like makes him special?
No. And again, I love talking about it for that exact reasons, right? You and I coach a lot of junior golfers, a lot of college golfers, and we see talented golfers a lot. And I know that word's thrown around a lot, but we have these athletes now that are playing this game and their swing speeds are unbelievable and they can hit the ball at earlier and earlier ages, which is awesome. But I think there's those intangibles that really do make the difference. And I think Colin has had that for a long, long, long time. So we can certainly look at great hand-eye coordination, great club face control. Those are technical skills that he had and he kept developing. But some of those things, like you mentioned that I talked about at that presentation, are some intangibles, but I believe those intangibles can be taught and trained.
Yes.
And part of that is just this overall mindset. And I've already brought up the idea of learning mindset or growth mindset, as it's now kind of coined, is if you're always looking at every single experience as something that you can learn from, first off, going into any event, okay, curiosity is one of my favorite words. And if I'm curious about, I wonder how this round's going to go, is a lot different than, oh crap, I'm not sure how I'm going to play today. And that when people already have the fear mindset and the worry mindset and the anxious mindset, we want to flip that with, hey, a lot of things could happen, but I'm curious how I'm going to perform today is a slight different word choice that I think makes a big difference. The other part of that is even after the fact is being curious why this happened. Why did I shoot the score I should? And that curiosity is much different than critical of I stink, I'm horrible, I can't believe this, right? And that does us no good whatsoever. And so unfortunately, that negative self-talk, that criticism only brings confidence down. There's emotional issues with that. And I'm not saying you're supposed to be happy after a round. That's not the point. The point is, hey, I am disappointed with that round. What can I learn from it instead of just beating yourself up all the time? So I think at the core, he's a very curious person. He asks a lot of questions. And part of that is like this, what I call a mastery mindset, is what drives him is to be the best player he can be and to be a great player. And every day doing the little things that are going to make a difference. And even the little nuances of chipping into the grain and how I want that wedge to be and the release point with the right hand and all that kind of stuff. He's just curious about how to get it done, even if the first repetition doesn't work. But some people are going to give up easy. They're certainly going to just blame it as bad this, bad that, instead of, that ball did this or that leading edge led into here. And they're not really being in that environment of learning. So his learning, his mastery mindset is fantastic. He's always been highly, highly competitive. And I mentioned the story at the presentation where I like to compete with every single one of my students. Okay, and most of the juniors I really like to compete with. And I just kind of, let's say he was 10 years old, and I said, okay, Colin, closest to the hole from here out of the rough. I don't care if he beats me or not. That's not the point. But it's, does he take on the challenge? And every single time he said, okay. And there wasn't an excuse like, well, you're better than me, you're a pro, you've been playing. None of that. It was like, let's take it on. And so he's already looking at competing. That's in his DNA. And he wants to win. But I think the competitive juice helps him focus. And so competitiveness, I think, is a good thing. I think it's okay to want to win. I know that sometimes now it's not about winning. It's about the process. I get it. But why do we do a process? Hopefully to get the outcome we want. I don't know about you. I know Colin likes holding up trophies better than, being in second place.
Absolutely.
So those are some of the key is, his curiosity, his learning mindset, his mastery mindset, and his competitiveness are there. And the last part of that is he doesn't make excuses.
Love that.
Okay.
That's so, like, you need to say that like 12 times. Right? I mean, for the kids that we deal with, that's all we hear. Yeah.
And again, I tell this story a lot where, I knew it was a game changer with him too. He's 16 years old, comes back from an AJGA event at PGA National and shoots the highest score. I think it was 84, something like that. And his first thing as he comes to me, he knows the questions I'm going to ask, right? What'd you do well? What'd you learn? What we can work on? Before I could say anything, it's, hey, I did not control my ball flight in that wind. We need to learn how to flight the irons. Instead of, I played bad because of the wind, and then you just leave it at that. That's just an excuse. But you say, hey, here's the reason. We're going to do something about it. And then you fast forward, and he will love if it gets windy in a round of golf.
Yeah.
Windier the better for him. So he's turned at that moment, which may be considered a weakness, it's completely now a strength.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Talk a little bit about how he switched or how he came to switch to his putting grip. And then,
sure.
Because I think that's another testament to you. I love when my players are, like you said, curious. Now you still have to be the filter and go, all right, let's test this a little bit.
Right.
But I mean, there can be a little bit of both sides there. But and then also, I would love to know some of the favorite putting drills that you guys work on, or maybe like preparation drills before a round, or just like baseline drills, if you can share that.
Sure. Yeah. So back to the curiosity. I mean, being Colin's coach since he's 8 years old, you go through your natural changes of golf swing, for instance, him getting stronger, him going from a draw to a fade, and those things, it's just maturity, you change things, right? Putting's an interesting one, right? Because somebody might have a putting stroke when they're 10 years old look very, very similar when they're 20, right? Mm-hmm. There's not the physicality of it different. But I think with Colin, back to he wants to be comfortable over a shot, and he's been a streaky putter in his career. He's been a clutch putter. That's how I define it. Okay. Other people have different definitions when they look at stats. And I said, well, he's won 5 times, 6 times worldwide. He's doing well in certain situations. So I'm not in denial that there's some weeks that it's not up to where we want it to be. No question. Mm-hmm. So we start looking again at patterns. And if we start seeing putts going a touch short, a touch right, we look at club face being open. We're like, okay, is that mental or is that physical? So put mental aside right now. If we see that pattern on the practice green, we would then look at it as being more of a physical thing, right? We're seeing that. And so the club face being a touch open, okay, is now the grip is the only contact with the club, so it seems a good one to look at. And so he's done cross-handed in college. I mean, so it's not new for him to try something else. I think in this case, he's at his club in Las Vegas, and Mark O'Meara's a member there. And like Colin does, he asks questions. Hey, Mark, why do you do that kind of grip, and what do you call it, and all that kind of stuff, right? 10 minutes later, Colin gets that answer and goes, okay, let me try it. And so back to kind of why he would try it would be, is there a different way to release the putter face through? Right. And by having that saw grip, however we want to call it, it did allow the right hand to go through the hitting area a little smoother, okay? And so at first, and you hit it right on the head. He came to me at LA right after he saw, and he said, "Hey, Rick, I'm going to show you something. Don't it's like, don't freak out. Judge." And I go, "I never do. Let's look at it, right?" Yeah. And the stroke looked good. It did. The ball was starting well. The good roll. Yet it's interesting, and this is again for those junior golfers out there. The first week using it at the Genesis here in Los Angeles was some of the worst putting stats we've ever seen. So he makes a change. He feels it's good. The stats don't back it up. So now as a coach, what do you do? and we just have the conversation. So I just saw 4 rounds and I didn't see him make much. And again, he's different where if he says he's fine with it, then I say he's fine with it. And he says, no, it feels really good. So the next week, we fast forward, he's now in Florida. And long story short, he wins the WGC event at Concession. And he putted, I think he was top 5 in stats that week for putting. He was plus 0.99 strokes per round or something like that. So you go, that's interesting. And he's on Bermuda, which he's not comfortable with. So it wasn't a surface issue. He grew up in Los Angeles, POA. So it wasn't the surface. It was more that he finally got that comfortable with it. You start stroking a few. I think he told me like on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and you go, I'm ready to go. And that's all you need to do, right? Confidence. You're not thinking anymore. You roll a few 7-footers in, and you go, okay, I got this. And you saw that momentum go for that week.
Yeah, it's just him recognizing that I feel good about it. It's just going to take a little bit of time, right? I mean, sometimes it doesn't happen right overnight.
Right.
So good for you guys to like stick with it and go, yeah, let's give it another chance, right? I mean, putting's so subjective. I mean, it's just, it could have been a little bit of speed control. Who knows? A read could have been off. Probably wasn't stroke related. So what? Back to the pulls.
Sure.
Last week, what did you feel like the grip got off a little bit, or like what is your go-to as far as the technique? I mean, we know the face is closing, but what do you think?
Correct. Yeah. And again, we don't know exactly the answer because, it happened on the final round. He's taking a little bit of a break, but we looked at some potentials, right? Mm-hmm. And if in his warm-up he uses a mirror a lot to just double-check his eye line and his shoulder line and his club face at setup, right? We checked those things off, and he said that was all the same. So now we look at, okay, what could the putter be doing? So it may be a little bit, not the hand was fine, but maybe there was a little bit of a setup issue with how the right arm comes into play once that hand is there. So that may have gotten him into kind of I'll call it a pre-pull position already. The right arm gets a little bit more out than under. But it's just right now, we'll certainly work on it. But when you see the first 4 putts go left, you have a pattern, obviously. And so we'll look at that. But, kind of back to one of your other questions about drills, we don't do a ton of drills. A lot of it's speed related. A lot of it is even from a starting line standpoint, putting just a ball marker that's flat, like the old plastic one's flat, and you're just running it over that. And we're just seeing start line for the first, let's say 8 to 10 feet. And then the speed is, it's an interesting one with feet, that how you feel a ball to a hole, right? He's a very creative iron player, and can we get him creative in his putting also is something that we're always working on. And I think some weeks he feels super comfortable, and you see the success at some of these tournaments that he wins or gets close, that his putting's good. But I think it's more feel and how he interprets the putt that makes the big difference. So
no real structured drills that he's working on. That's interesting. He seemed to be, knowing you, you seem very organized, and then you would think that he would be kind of the same way. Does he warm up the same way as far as how he goes about like pre-round? Like, can you share like what that
certainly.
looks like? Yeah.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. So, it's, he is very organized. He's very punctual. So hour and 10 minutes, he's outside that locker room and we're ready to go to the putting green, and you put that mirror down and everything's fundamentals first. And
so kind of baseline, 10, 12, right? 15. Yeah. You're right at the beginning. He just goes baseline with the mirror.
Boom. Right.
Okay.
And exactly. So it's putting first. It's the mirror. It's eyes over. It's checking a few things. Put him on on extremely straight putt, and you check that off. And then he's going to hit some long putts just to gauge a little bit of the speed for that day. And that may take 6, 7, 8 minutes, right? And then it's off to the range, and he's going to work there. And then after that, he's going chipping, pitching, bunker, and then back to the putting green before he gets to the first tee. And then when he's on that putting green, he's going to be a little bit more routine based and target based. And there's no more mirrors. There's no more those type of things. It's now seeing a target. It's feeling that target and getting ready to go to the first tee. But he is very structured. One other thing that he's added in the last year or so is we're not big. We don't use TrackMan a lot. but he is using TrackMan to improve his wedge play, and he uses it now in warm-ups. And so that TrackMan is right behind him, and it's almost like he's guessing distances. He'll hit and say, hey, I think that's 30, and you look at the TrackMan to get that verification. Yeah. So we've seen a little bit of change in that, but he wants to get ready to play at that point, and it's going to be more target-oriented. His caddy, JJ, is fantastic, where there might be a couple interesting hole locations they already maybe know that day, or maybe it's a wind that's coming off a certain thing that may require, let's say, a draw for him off the tee, which is maybe not his go-to. So those are some things that are talked about a little bit in warm-up, but it is pretty structured on that end.
Yeah, that's great. So back to your information on mental focus, right? So this is something that I just love, is you say flow follows focus. All right, can you expand on that? And then a follow-up would be like, how do you train focus? Because I think that's the $1 million question. We may even brought this up on the last podcast, but it would be awesome if you got any kind of exercises or applications that you do work on with your players. But flow follows focus, I think, is a huge topic.
Yeah, and it's something that I've really gotten into the last few years, even though I've certainly studied sports psychology and the mental side. Going in this idea of flow, and most people would use the word zone, but flow is an actual physiological response. I mean, our heart rate changes, our brainwave changes, there's breathing patterns that are associated with. So it's something we actually feel, yet from a psychological standpoint, the only way to be at peak performance. Flow is an optimal performance, optimal experience, and the only way you can do that is be in the present moment, period. Okay? If I'm in the future, I could either be anxious or worried about what could happen. I could be excited, which seems fine, but I'm in the future. Or I could still be beating myself up for the 3-putt I just had, which is now in the past. There's no way to be in the flow state if I'm not in the present moment. So flow follows focus is I have to focus on what is relevant in my environment. And so that's the if we would call it the mechanical part of focus, is are you paying attention to what's relevant in this case, a golf shot? And so a couple things on this. One, I'll answer it first with more of the technical side of pre-shot routine, which I know you teach and a lot of great coaches teach, is you got to pay attention to what's relevant by asking present-based questions. Like the first thing I always ask from a player, I put him I just throw a ball down on the grass or in the second shot on a par 4, and I say, what are you paying attention to now? And they say the lie. I go, great, cool. I want the first thing to be the lie. Tell me about the lie. And they'll say, it's a bad lie. I go, that's irrelevant. Okay? How is that lie going to affect the shot would be a much, much better question to ask than it's a good or a bad lie. So I want people to now say, oh, that ball's sitting down, it's going to come out low, it's going to go low right. And now asking more present-based questions, the lie, the wind, where's the wind coming from, how firm is this green? Those are present-based questions. So that's more the mechanical of choosing a club. And you do this already with them, right? And you're going to visualize shot. Those are all the mechanics of a pre-shot routine. And I would say most people would say, yeah, Rick, I do that. I go, okay. But then I ask, does it get to the result you want, which is being fully committed to the shot, fully present, fully confident? And then I get, well, no. Then I said, well, then your pre-shot routine doesn't work. Okay? So we got to get out of just that it's pure mechanics of, oh, I do this, this, and this. What I have now, through the research with flow, is why are you more attentive in one type of shot than another type of shot? And the example I gave at the presentation, which I always give, is how many of those listeners out there have hit an unbelievable trouble shot, a recovery shot? In most part, I get this big, oh yeah, Rick, you should have seen this one I had here. Da, da, da. And they go, oh, isn't that interesting? Huh, is that a shot you practice? And they go, well, no. And I go, oh, isn't it interesting you pull off a very challenging shot that you don't practice? And then I try to peel it back and say, hey, why do you think you hit that shot so well? And part of we call them flow triggers is if something is new, we pay attention to it. So novelty. If something is complex, so if this was in the right rough underneath a tree 150 yards away with bunkers that are flanking the green, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's complexity. There's unpredictability, and there's challenge. And people like to be challenged, believe it or not, okay, to a point.
Yeah.
And I think the other part is clear goals, which is a big flow trigger, is when you have a trouble shot, sometimes the visualization already takes care of itself, right? I'm underneath the tree. Well, I know I got to hit it low. And then I got to head a little cut. And then it's got to, and all that takes care of it. And before you know it, you go, man, I saw that shot so clearly. I go, great. Okay. And there's other types of flow triggers that are part of that. But let me turn the other side of the coin, though. You're in the middle of the fairway, 80 yards away, ball sitting up, flat lie, middle hole location, no wind, no bunkers around. How many times have we hit that 80-yard wedge to 60 feet? A lot, unfortunately. And I believe that's a mental breakdown, not a physical.
Yeah, falling asleep.
That's an unforced error. Yeah, you fall asleep, right?
Yeah.
There is no challenge. There's no novelty, no unpredictability, no creativity, no clear goal anymore. And that unfortunately creates now a disconnect. I may have gone through my routine, but I was falling asleep during the routine. There's no engagement. Then you're not focused. So that's part of this process is you can have a great pre-shot routine and practice the mechanical part of making a good decision. That's fantastic. I'm looking at full engagement though. You actually want to hit the shot. You can't wait to hit it close. You get and that's where like creativity comes into play. And I think that, kind of going back to Colin and some of my best players is they sometimes tap into those clear goals. They tap into creativity. They're creating golf shots and they're like kids. We are in a flow state when we're much more of an 8, 9, 10-year-old than we are when we're 30 years old beating ourselves up all the time.
Hard to believe, right?
Right?
Yeah.
So, the flow, follow, focus idea is I got to be in the present moment. Certainly we ask present-based questions, but I always kind of ask like that follow-up, like what about this shot either gets you excited, gets you creative, gets you... and so sometimes in a playing lesson, if I find that good player is falling asleep or disengaged, I will change one of those variables. I'll change the challenge level. Okay, if you think this is such an easy shot, hit it to 2 feet. Or, hey, I'm going to beat you on this, right? Now they don't want to lose to some old dude here. And so they go, okay, I'll take you on, and then they hit it to 3 feet, right? So the shot remained the same. Their interpretation, their mindset of it shifted. And so that's what I want people to be aware of is, can you stay engaged for those 70 shots, not just go your checklist of your pre-shot routine? And I think you'd be surprised how many shots are hit in a disengaged state.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, and I think that's, again, it's like when you can start to learn to change that or train that, I guess. But I think from what I hear from you and what I've learned from you is just asking better questions, right? Asking more intuitive questions. And then following up with that is remind us of those 8 components of the flow state. I can't even pronounce the guy's name that you right. that you learned it from, but it started with clear goals, and you mentioned a few of those: strong concentration, and then the one I was really curious about was the distorted sense of time. Right, so it's like those things that where you almost, I call it blacking out. Right, it's like you're in such a locked in, focused, you don't even remember some of the stuff. Can you go through that? I think it's fascinating.
Sure, yeah, I'll go through a few of those. So the gentleman was Dr. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Don't ask me to spell it here. And he passed away about 5 weeks ago, and he was at the forefront of flow. And something also called positive psychology is studying what makes people great, what makes them successful, fulfilled in life, and why don't we learn from that instead of just focusing on what's wrong with people. So it really resonated with me. I'm a very optimistic, high-energy guy, and I go, man, I want to know how I can improve my own life, right? So years ago, I was going through my master's degree and read his book, Flow, The Optimal Experience. I think it was 1990 he wrote that. And since then, he had some other ones. But him, and then I did some, if you want to call it, coaching certification through a company with the author Stephen Kotler, who wrote a book, The Art of the Impossible, and he's, I would say, a top 5 flow researcher. And what you start looking at is those things that Csikszentmihalyi talked about are certainly still true, and then there's nuances to each one of them. So back to I'm in a flow state when, we already talked about, I'm fully absorbed in the present moment, given, okay? Time could change. We all know the basketball player or the football player, like a quarterback. It's the final drive with Tom Brady, and he can almost look at the defenders, and they're kind of going in slow motion, and he can pick up we call it pattern recognition. He can look at the defense and already know what they're going to do before they do it. That's a sense of a time lapse, which changes. The other thing which I think needs to be stressed a lot, especially some of our junior golfers, is the enjoyment of the moment. Okay. So many people, I'm not a big fan of the word grind. I was grinding out there. I go, that sounds like a lot of fun. Okay. But if it's like, hey, I took on the challenge out there, man, I couldn't wait to bounce back after that double and make birdie on the next hole, right? We're taking it on like we want to. Part of flow is you actually enjoy the process. Sometimes it sucks, and part of flow is actually struggle first, but you can't wait to do it. Okay? I have a lot of junior golfers, when you ask them why they play golf, at about 16, 17, the reason used to be, I love it, I love being out with my friends, I love having fun, and now it's like, oh, I got to get a college scholarship. My parents, and it's all for these extrinsic reasons. So flow is about doing it for internal reasons that are kind of congruent with yourself. It's like, I go out there and play golf, and you want to create golf shots and challenge yourself is a lot different than I'm going to go play golf only to have people tell me how good I am, and hopefully I get a medal and put myself on Instagram and tell how great I am, right? Those would be extrinsic reasons, and that is actually pulls us out of flow. So we look at being absorbed. We look at doing it for the right reasons. There is time changes going on there. But the word focus and concentration and absorb keeps coming up in all of that research. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, kind of back to your focus question before, is I'm finding a lot of juniors, a lot of college players now embracing mindfulness practices and meditation practices. I
was going to lead you into that.
Yeah. So, think about if I have to, I have a ton of them on my phone, but if I just ask somebody to do a simple breathing rate, let's say inhale 3, hold 1, exhale 3, that's a very simple rate. And I say, count those breaths. Could somebody do that up to 20, 25 breaths without being interrupted? I don't know. I doubt it. But how quickly can you get back to breath, and how quickly can you now get back to feeling the breath go through your nose and holding it, and so on and so forth? The ability is to be aware that I'm distracted and to refocus on the breath, or maybe it's the relevant question and such. And I'm finding a lot of college players are very open now to this idea of the Headspace app or the Calm app, and that's great. They're being more aware of what they're thinking and how quickly, if you are distracted, how quickly can you bring it back is really the question. So that's something that we've seen definitely with flow. Another thing that wasn't necessarily on that list, but I want to, again, go back to is when you're in flow, it's all about immediate feedback, in that I get to, in golf, hit a shot, learn, adjust, hit a shot, learn, instead of criticism or critical, which is hit the shot, oh crap, you suck, Rick. Okay, now what? And if you don't go with what happened and what I learned, you have pulled yourself out of flow. It's interesting, in a flow state, your self-critical voice shuts off. So now we're no longer beating ourselves up. And so if we get somebody in the present moment and they just see the shot, observe it, get the feedback, maybe adjust, it seems like that's what we should do all the time. But when the emotion and the critical voice comes in and we're bad at this, and that, you're pulling yourself further and further away from the present moment. And so that's the other thing that I've appreciated with learning all of these nuances of flow, is that especially golf, the little white ball's not moving. Okay? We have the ability to be in the present moment, yet, as you and I know, it is very challenging for people. People, especially the younger generation, is wired to where instant gratification and their attention does travel very quickly to sometimes irrelevant information. So I didn't tell you all 8, but when you look at all those things, there's a lot of them that you can start applying right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important ones were immediate feedback, absorption, which I would add, and we may have talked about this last time, but I think it's worth mentioning, is reflection. And you do encourage your players to journal, right? I mean, like, do you give them some sort of process of journaling? Do you give them a little bit of, encouragement of okay, here's what I want you to write down or how you should do it? Or is it just about, hey, take a few minutes and maybe write down what you worked on or what you thought? Can you share any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I leave it very open. There is another trigger in flow called autonomy, is when people feel like they have control over their environment and it's up to them, it's actually more of a flow trigger. So I rarely will say, you have to do this. I will say, hey, here's a couple worksheets, look at some of the questions, answer whatever comes to mind, knowing that maybe in the next session I'm going to ask some of them anyways. So I want them to be self-aware going into it. So I have some very easy checklist stuff, okay? But then there's more of those questions that are the basic ones, like what did I do well today? I always start with that as the first frame, okay? And then what did I learn? And then I always say, what do we need to work on? Because I want to be part of that team of, hey, what do we need to work on? What can I do as a coach? And I think when we frame it that way, it's the simplest way from a journaling standpoint. But when they have their practice, I also have them journal, even if it's 2 minutes. Hey, this drill worked really well, Rick. I had this feel coming in where it felt really connected, and I'm going to try it tomorrow. I don't know about you, but I've had these journaling sessions back in college where, 3 years later, I'm struggling with the ball flight. And I'm going, let me look back when I played really, really well. And I go, yeah, dang it, that's easy. I can get back to that, right? And so it's not all about what's wrong. I want to emphasize that. It's let's learn from what's right. What is that drill? What is that feel? What is that thing that my coach told me that could click me right back into play? So I give some framework for it, but I do want to see where they come with it. I have some players who are extremely open and honest, and it's 3 pages of just, and then other people just give me some basics, but it's starting that self-awareness that I think is the key.
No, that's huge. And I'll give a quick shout out to my son that had an unbelievable fall, won his first college tournament. And I think he started to do something that was a daily habit that I thought was fantastic because I sort of encouraged it, he started a gratitude journal, right? And it was just simply just writing 2 or 3 things every morning of what he's grateful for. And I remember, and the reason I bring this up, there's a segue, is that you mentioned in your talk that performance precedes gratitude and how that sort of changes the wiring in your brain. I thought that was just awesome. So can you share that with us?
Yeah, and I will get more of the details of some of this research that's been done, but gratitude is actually a performance enhancer.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear.
He's become a friend of mine. He's a neuroscientist at USC, Dr. Glenn Fox, 2 N's in Glenn. Great guy, plays some golf, and he's studied gratitude. And it's an interesting thing when you and I have talked about mindset, right? And that's still a very kind of vague, out there term. But if we say I have a gratitude mindset, I am now looking at the world for things that I'm grateful for, is a heck of a lot different than what I see where people are on whatever their favorite news channel is, and they just want to have the frame of what's wrong with everything and stuff like that. It's just, we can look at it many different ways. And I think gratitude starting the day is a wonderful exercise. And we talked about it last time, is the goal would be tomorrow I'm going to jot down 3 things that I've never jotted down ever.
Something different. Yeah.
So now it pushes that, and then we're looking for that. And it could be just as simple as, wow, I got a great parking spot. But now I'm open and looking at that there's possibilities and there's a lot of things to look at. So yes, it creates a different framework and mindset. And I think it also leads to optimism, which optimism happens to be part of flow too, it's not that everything's going to be great. It's just you believe that it could get better. And I think that's very powerful. And I think gratitude helps serve that.
I love it. All right. So you mentioned earlier before we actually started recording that we're going to start offering some certifications, or is that sort of what you were talking about? Like, share that with us, and then we can go in any other direction that you would like to.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Yeah, it's like, again, back to the thing that we talked about even on the first podcast. It's like, we don't all have your brain, we don't all have your information and knowledge, right? We want to know, as coaches, how can we apply some of this information to our students? So I'm very excited about this.
No, thank you. And it's been a long process. I've tried this a few times, and now I have a wonderful partner in this. And it came along because, as you know, as a coach, you can only coach for so many hours per week. With more of my expertise with the mental side, I can do it from my back office, which is great. I don't have to be at a golf course all the time. Yet it still gets to a point like I can only take on so many students. And some of my stuff, I believe, can be done in a group, can be done in an online format, to get the real good fundamentals and the core from that.
Right.
And then I've had coaches reach out who, I've been certified in other methods, and then now they're coming to me, hey, Rick, do you have anything to certify in like the mental side of the game? I said, I'm working on it. And so finally here in the next couple of weeks, and this is late part of 2021, is something called flowcode.golf. Flowcode.golf. We're going to be, and it's going to be both for business to consumer, so that golfer out there that wants to work on their mental game, it'll have a complete program of how do you apply some of these flow triggers and how do you create a game plan or a program for yourself. And then also a coaching certification, which is certainly going through the manuals and the videos, and you'll take an exam and you'll do an interview with me because I want to make sure that, one, you understood it, and two, how are you going to apply it? And we're creating a community of coaches where we want to get a lot more content out there, do online type of projects, but also in person down the road, do that a little bit more. So I'm very, very excited about that because, as you know, for me, I think golf is just a metaphor for life. So if we can start doing some of these mindfulness and gratitude journals and visualization exercises for golf, I know it's going to help somebody's life also. And part of the flow is that this transfers into life.
Absolutely. So when do you think it's going to be available?
Well, we're going to launch. Well, the official launch date is January 10th of 2022.
Nice.
You probably, if somebody went on it right now and they could go around and look at it, it would be fine now. But we'll be full bore. We're having. We've done some podcasts that'll be out there soon. We're going to have a lot more content, and like I said, it's going to be about a community of coaches. At first, it'll have my name on it and stuff like that. But down the road, it's just going to be a community with a vision of helping golfers and even beyond golf with some of these principles. So we're excited to have coaches come on board and do their own classes and do their own thing. So it's going to be fun.
Nice. How's your new book coming along? Are you still working on that, or is that been put on hold by as busy as you've been with all this other stuff? I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, no, thanks. My son, he always ribs me, because I got a lot of balls in the air, right? We're juggling a lot of balls, and that one dropped a little bit. So it's still moving forward. I've got everything going. I got a book coach. Sometimes we need a book coach too, like we need a golf coach, and keeping me focused on what I want to do with this book. But yeah, it's still we're moving forward on that, and the more I learn, the more I want to put in the book, and then that slows me down. So we'll see. But we're still working on it.
Awesome. Look forward to when that comes out.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one questioner from one of the listeners, and then we'll get to any other topics before we wrap. How early in the process, this is from Matt Rudy from Golf Digest, by the way. So this is good. Rudy at Rudy Writer. If you guys want to follow him on Twitter, give him a little shout out. How early in the process do you recognize somebody as a prodigy? And have you ever massively been impressed with somebody's upside? And I mean, obviously Colin, but I mean, is there any other in the pipeline of players that you're working with maybe, and you can kind of go into that first question, but I was thinking, aside from Colin, who else?
It's a great question.
What are the indicators, right?
Yeah, and so I've said this before. I may have said it on the last podcast, but I literally remember a date when I come home, I sit on the couch, I tell my wife, I said, this guy's got it, and that's when Colin was 12 years old. Okay. There was something about those intangibles we talked about. We have a 12-year-old kid who, yes, had good hand-eye coordination, but who is coachable, who is a positive, who is creative, who could, I'm going, wow, you don't see that at that age.
Right.
So I knew he had the mental makeup early. Now, we know as coaches, talented juniors could go to college, they could get hurt, they could have a bad breakup with a girlfriend, they could not get played by their coach, and their career goes sideways, okay? So we know there has to be a lot of things that go well for it to all get all the way there. It's interesting. I love that question because I've now looked back at other juniors that I've worked with, some with swing, some with mental, some with both or whatever. and trying to follow along. And there was a couple girls, one that I worked with who was like top 10 in AJGA and Rolex. And I saw her when she was like 12 or 13, and you just saw the physicality of somebody who could take over, and she had a great mindset. And I believe she just graduated from playing high-level D1. So there's some of those. But I think, I look back, did I get somebody wrong, And so often I don't think I've just said, other than Colin, I honestly haven't told anybody like, hey, you got to watch this person. I've just said, hey, I've got some good players. Right. And I've got a couple college players that I'm working with now that I believe their game will translate to the next level. And I think that's the key thing is when we talk about these different levels, certainly there's physical part. I know everybody wants to hit the ball really, really far, and I go, great, but there's so many different conditions that you have to play in at these different levels. And then mentally, can you deal with the ups and downs? Can you deal with being alone on the road? Can you deal with missing cuts? I mean, some of that stuff is not dealt with in college as much because the college coach is doing all your travel, and if you play poorly, you're still with your buddies. And that's part of that mindset thing that keeps going with that. And I think the other thing, and this is just a complete bias on mine, is that the ones that I tend to look at a young age who love to play more than practice. Now, some people say, well, you got to practice hard. I go, I get it, but you want to play. You want to learn how to play. You want to hit different shots. You want to get out there and so that's a thing that I think we have to be careful in our industry, that it's just not practice, get my TrackMan numbers at zeroed and do all this stuff. I think we're missing something in that. And so I look at the player not just as, did that shot look beautiful, but what was their mindset behind it? How did they react to it? And those are the things that I believe happens more from playing the game.
Yeah, it was interesting. I don't know, were you in the room when Bryson did his interview at the top 100?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fascinating. Yeah, right? I was just saying that was fascinating because currently he's using a lot of block practice, trying to hit one shot, as he said, trying to hit the perfect shot. But then he prefaced that by saying, hey, look, when I was a kid, all I did was play, right? I learned all the shots. I could hit all the shots. I can still hit all the shots. So he didn't say like he's always been in that mindset of block practice or trying to hit it far. Like you have to build those skills first. So going back to your point, I think that's a great way to think about it. I think like we say always, success leaves clues, right? So after you've coached somebody like Colin, or you start seeing more, then you have that ability to look back, right, and say, okay, what made him great, right? So then you can start to look closer when you see kids come through the pipeline and go, okay, well he kind of has this, and then. So obviously hindsight's 20/20, but I think a lot of it is after we've seen some really good kids, then you can look back and go, this is what made him great. So you're going to, like you said, and I think you put it perfectly, is, he's going to change the game for the better because of who he is, not because of all his results, and he has that platform now because of his results, but he's going to help so many kids, I think, along the way.
And let me go back to kind of the question is like, can we see that level of player, getting to another level or something like that? What popped in my head was it's easy for us to say, okay, they just shot 68. Obviously they're a good player. But I sometimes am now looking at the other thing of what would interfere with the development, right? That's a word that I use a lot, is developing. Yeah, somebody shot 68 when they're 16 years old. They think that's just an easy transition, that they're going to do this, and this. That doesn't always happen.
Right.
So then I look at, well, what are those stumbling blocks, the interference that might stop somebody's development? And that one is an interesting one because Bryson does things completely different than Colin, and they're world-class players. I would never tell Bryson he has to do what Colin, or vice versa. Yeah. Because Bryson in that said he does that to be confident, right? That was in a way how he trains confidence. I'll just do the same thing over and over again. I'll know what I'm going to get. Confidence is a skill, right?
That's right.
Other players may say, hey, I'm going to try all kinds of different shots, so no matter what comes my way, I'm prepared for those. That's confidence also. And I think we, of course, need a little bit of a balance of both. But if we looked at what interferes with performance, again, I'm going to go bias here. I'm seeing a lot of players trying to be perfect in golf swings. They're trying to have an Instagram swing and all that stuff. And I think it is getting in the way of them developing as players.
Completely agree. Completely agree. And that's, I mean, we talked about this last time, is I'm moving more, or trying to improve my coaching side, right? So it's like having that balance as a coach and a teacher. Now, knowing when to switch and knowing when to do things, I think that's just the genius part of the coach, which I don't know that you can tell people, because every situation is different, right? So you got to know who's in front of you, right? It's like you got to know when you're talking to Bryson, you're not going to treat him like a Colin. You know, I mean,
Correct.
Hopefully you're smart enough to do that. It goes back to the whole, EQ versus IQ conversation. But yeah, I think that's the list you got to look at, is like, what are the roadblocks to success?
Yeah, and back to kind of that interference, right? If we have that 16-year-old who then goes to an AJGA event and they played quite poorly, right? And everybody expected them to do this, is now how are they bouncing back, right? Do they go sideways with it, or they say, hey, I'm going to get better from it? Those are those little things along the road that, how are they steering that, I think becomes important. And, not to just talk juniors, but just as they get into college, there's more potential distractions, there's more potential interferences. They get on the road, you get a lot of these young pros, and it's like, hey, they don't have much money. They're grinding about money. I mean, there's so many things that could get them out of just playing in the state that they need to for that round of golf. And, do they have those skill sets to do it? Cannot always be seen when they're 14. Maybe you see how they deal with a bad shot every now and then. Okay, but it starts escalating, and, do they have those skills later on, of course, is what we're looking at.
Absolutely. So how many opportunities have you had to, you don't have to name names, opportunities to join other teams as just the mental coach for other players now?
Yeah, a few. Not really on the PGA Tour. I'm not honestly looking to be on anybody's team on the PGA Tour. I feel I'm on a pretty good team right now.
You know what I mean, though, to expand your
totally.
stable.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, I've been fortunate to I work with a few players on the LPGA Tour, and my, really what I love working on with is juniors and college players. I feel that giving them some of these skills early on builds up to that point. I'm not a huge fan of if I'm brought in to fix something. I'm more about developing something. And I get it in this day and age. Hey, you need to make a cut. You need to do that. Give me the magic words, Rick, and I'll do them. But I think it's more of the development, and these are skill sets that we want to go with. So, I've been very fortunate. Again, people have been reaching out, and that's the other part of why with the flowcode.golf is to get that information out there more for people to get a good baseline on that, and then kind of go from there. But my business is expanded, yes.
You're so good at deflecting. I love it. Awesome, man. Well, is there anything other topics that you want to talk about before we wrap? I mean, I appreciate your time, and I think we probably should do this once a month because I think it's just fantastic.
I think back to us as coaches. It was a privilege to be able to speak to the top 100 coaches, and being around that energy, right? The thing that I learned early on, maybe not early enough, but in my 20s, I thought I knew everything about golf coaching. I thought I knew all the positions and all this kind of stuff. I'm 50 years old now, and it's more of when you're in the environment of great coaches, you realize how much you don't know. And that can be humbling, and yet it also is a reminder like, wow, we got so much cool stuff to learn. And we have so many people that we can learn from. And so I appreciate you inviting me on the podcast to at least share some of my information, but I am always looking from other people to say, hey, I didn't know that. And that's why I was picking people's brains when I was there, because everybody has their own filter as coaches. of what they're looking for. And I always use the word bias because I do know what my biases are. Okay. I believe the mental game is more important than mechanical. That's my bias. Other people are going to say the exact opposite. That's fine. But I know what my framework is. And so I just enjoy being around people who want to learn and who kind of has that passion for it. And so I love being around you, and we're talking and stuff like that. And I think that's needs to happen even for us golfers who are learning the game, is to be passionate about the learning process of it.
Absolutely. So tell the listeners how they can get a hold of you, how they can say hello, give them your socials.
Sure.
And your website.
Yeah, all my socials, and I don't do a ton on social. Every now and then I'll post something, but
you need to put a little bit more out on Twitter and
I know.
Instagram. I got to get you going with that. Like you have the time, right?
Well, yeah, and I don't know. I'll start doing more. 2022, right?
There you go.
Yeah, so it's my full name, Rick Sessinghaus, on all the social. Sometimes I'll post some stuff that we're working on with Colin at some of the events, especially the majors. I think that's fun. And then some of the projects that I'll be working on, I'll certainly go out there. And then my website's my full name, ricksessinghaus.com. And then the new project that is going to be launching here at the start of 2022 is flowcode.golf. And looking forward to getting feedback on that from the golfers out there.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for your time as always. And you're the best, man. Keep doing what you're doing.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
What's up, everyone? Guru back here again with a couple of things before you go. Big thank you to Rick for coming on the show and sharing his story and his incredible knowledge and insights on the mental side of golf, and really sharing his story about life and also his work on the PGA Tour, which is super cool. Make sure you give him a follow on the gram at Rick Sessinghaus, and check out his website at ricksessinghaus.com, and then give him a social wave. Tell him thank you for coming on the pod. Thank you again to our sponsors, Straight Down Apparel, for making me look good, and nvdhemp.com and Swing U. When you go buy your CBD needs, nvdhemp.com, make sure you use the promo code GURU20 for a 20% discount for life. You won't be disappointed. Also, make sure you go to the App Store and download my Golf Guru app. Appreciate that. And give me a follow and reach out to me on Twitter and Instagram at Golf Guru TV. If you have a question about anything and want to reach out, golfgurushow@gmail.com is the way to go, or just hit me up on the DM. Also, check out my website at golfgurutv.net, and make sure you leave your email at the bottom of the website so you can be included in my weekly newsletter, where you can get some additional content, videos, and another link to the podcast, which you've already found. Music on this podcast is brought to you by Kevin MacLeod and Zach Mullet. And then, as I always leave you with the mantra that I try to live my life by: make sure you study, make sure you practice, make sure you teach, and then make sure you, more importantly, pass it on to somebody. I'll talk to you next time. Thank you so much for listening.